All right, Coach Lee here. Let's talk all things No Country for Old Men. Just had an athlete rock it out this past weekend. He not only hit his goals, but he also got first overall. So that's a banner event for this particular athlete. Let's talk about this event, but let's talk about it kind of in the framework is that, when you go into an ultra event, there's many different types of events, obviously. And one famous popular type of ultra event is just a closed circuit where you're just going around over and over. You're going around a closed circuit loop and you're going after miles. You're chasing whatever you can do in that time limit. Well, there's 12 hours, 24 hours. We have Psycho coming up this weekend, 48 hours, and you're just chasing that mileage, okay? Well, you can chase the mileage. Last year at Psycho, they had the North American Championships there. And so it was more of a race. For some people, it was more of a race than just chasing a PR or chasing miles. But, when we have these events, you really have to understand what you want to do in that event. And you have to understand that event in your larger calendar. That's very important. So this past weekend, it was very illustrative of a certain type of way to fit an event in a larger calendar of events and goals for the year. But also it was not a closed circuit. It's just all open road. It's up and down. It's just, survival of the fittest kind of mentality. So let's jump into this ride and let's talk things No Country for Old Men. So the official route says it was 383 miles. I have 375 miles of data, roughly 16,000 feet of climbing. And we can see here that this is, here's where it is in the South Texas, right along that border. I'm sure there's some great stories that will come out of that. But it is just all up and down. But this looks really dramatic on this abbreviated elevation chart. But in the sense that this is very highly doable. Now, these black marks represent his time off the bike. So the athlete, as we can see, really did, in this 375 mile effort, spent most of his time on the bike, which is what we want. First thing I like to look at, right? So I get this data, athlete goes out, we kind of have an understanding of his goals to interpret the data. And we understand it just in terms of his goals, where he is in his calendar, all that great stuff. So when we look at this data, this is for it took him 26 hours to complete the 375 miles. We can see a negative power trend line that goes down throughout the event. Now, for me as a coach, pacing is crucial. So there's pillars of the ultra world that are holy, that cannot be violated. Pacing is one of them. Their pacing strategy is crucial. Their fueling strategy is crucial. Their technology, their mech, their bikes, all that stuff is absolutely crucial. But for me as a coach in training, two of the biggest things that we always work on is fueling and pacing. They go hand in hand. Pacing is crucial to getting your best event performance on any given day. And so I can see right off the bat that he went out pretty hard those first 7 hours. Then he settles in and just pretty much maintains his power wattage for that last event. Now, one of the, we have to understand this power data. So normally I wouldn't like this. So here's an example. If this was a closed circuit, so here's data that I have from Calvin's Challenge of this year. I had an athlete set a course record, and he won overall in his age group, and he won overall for all the athletes that were on the day. And we can see his pacing strategy. This is a closed circuit loop. His goal, this was an A event for this particular athlete, and his goal was to get a PR in mileage. This athlete never has broken the 400 mile mark. And so on this day, I believe it was 425 miles that he got. And that was his goal, a straight up 24-hour time trial on the bike where everything is disciplined, everything. We can really map it out, and we can really, as they say, science the shit out of the thing. And so that's what we were able to do. And he's able to start at a lower wattage, slower speed, and end at the end of the day at a faster speed and higher wattage. Now, so for the 10-hour or for the 24-hour TT, this is, this concept of negative splits where you start slower, easier, end harder, faster. I absolutely love it. It prevents the athlete from going out too hard. And if you implement this method into your 24-hour time trial, you are able to basically stay on the bike more. Okay. So if you go out too hard in these events, if you're going out, well above your race pace of what you can sustain for 24 hours, you're ultimately going to end up spending more time off the bike just due to fatigue. In these TTs, these 24-hour TTs, 48-hour TTs, it is crucial to stay on the bike, right? That's the number, kind of a big goal to get. Slow miles are better than no miles. We have to stay on the bike. So in this Calvin's Challenge, he has, I think for this day, he had like 11 minutes off the bike for the 24-hour period. It was a brilliant ride. And, even if this athlete would have come in last on this day, I wouldn't have cared, because he hit his PRs. He nailed his pacing strategy. He nailed his fueling strategy. He stays on the bike. And the data that he gives me is just absolute beauty, right? This is the Mona Lisa of data. So we go back to this particular athlete, and again, many of you know him, John Crawford, fantastic fella. Him and both his wife are ultra athletes, and they both ride recumbent bikes for most of their events, and they are just a lovely couple, and they're fantastic. So get to know them. If you see them at a race, go out and talk to them. So John has a different goal for his particular race. So he see that he goes out way too hard and then drops his wattage. So what's going on for John? So John, his A event is in Borrego Springs. So this is just a tune-up event. So all he wanted to do was to get on the podium for this event. So in his mind, this is not a 375-mile time trial. This is an actual race. So he goes out hard, establishes the gap. By hour 7, he is firmly in the lead of everybody. And so then he just backs off his wattage. His A event is Borrego Springs. So he doesn't want to dig too deep or go too hard. This is just a tune-up event. And when, I was talking about this the other day, if someone were to write a book, Ultra Cycling, the ultimate guide, it just couldn't exist, because there are just so many books. Every ultra athlete has a different book. John is able to use C and B events to prepare him for his A events. Not all athletes can do that. So here's a great example. Just this morning, I wake up to great data once again. An athlete yesterday, he can't get to events for his Borrego Springs attempt. So what he does, he goes to work all day, gets on his bike when he gets home from work, stays on his bike at race pace for 12 hours, then goes back to work. So this is a great 24-hour simulation. This is preparing him and his mind and giving him confidence for that 24 hours. Every ultra athlete does it differently. Like, for instance, John has so many hours that he's going to dedicate to this. That athlete that just did the overnighter for me, he's going to have so many hours that he can dig in and give to this sport called ultra cycling. So every single athlete does it differently. And John, I love athletes that can use actual events to get the job done. I love all ultra athletes, but I really love this methodology of using an event to dial in your A event. And that's what John does for this particular this particular course. We got a lot of power spikes here. We have some category 4 climbs here, and we have a couple more category climbs here. So it is not an easy course. It is a brutal course. Now, this is a good discussion, because John's goal was to finish the 375 miles in as high a speed as he could, then this is not the methodology to get that done. But that was not his goal. So if he was out there doing just a 375 mile TT, I would be really upset that he went out this hard for those first 7 hours. And I would say, John, drop and give me 50 push-ups right now. You went out too hard. Okay. So this methodology, it wins the race for John, but this does not produce his best time on the course. That's not the goal. The goal is a warm-up, tune-up event for Borrega Springs. Another thing that I love to look at is heart rate. So all this blue is his heart rate, and we can see that it does go down over time. It matches his power line as it goes down over time. He has a change of heart rate from the beginning to the end in about 37 beats per minute, and his watts go down over time about 33 watts. So he starts at a certain wattage and he ends about 33 watts lower than that wattage. And so basically 35 to 33, there is hardly any there's just essentially no cardiovascular drift whatsoever. So his heart mirrors his power. What we see in these 24-hour events, in that, your power could just stay straight line as imaginable, but that heart rate will fall over time. Okay. And so especially when we get to, our it depends on the athlete, but when you get to that hour 15 mark, that hour 20 mark, your watts are up here, but your heart, it's just your system fatigue, your cardiovascular fatigue, that is, your heart is just, your heart is turning in its red card for the day, saying, I'm done for the day. All right. So that's another one of the many reasons that for ultra athletes, watts are king, right? Not riding according to heart rate, but riding according to watts, because that heart rate, and I've looked at a lot of data from world-class athletes, world-class record attempts, all that great stuff. And everybody, you just see that heart rate go down over time. And so John's heart rate over that 375 miles is just on pair. This means that he really fueled correctly, and it means that his fitness is there. So these are great signs. We have great data from this event to help him in his Borrega Springs attempt. Okay, so great heart rate. Another thing that I always love to look at, I always love to look at where they're dropping watt bombs out there. So this yellow line, that's that's the elevation, and we can see these blue lines come down at certain points. And so, I'm using specific software. And so if we think of, the human body being composed of two fundamentally different physiologies, we have our diesel engine, which powers your 24-hour events. But then when and we measure that through a concept called FTP to understand and model your diesel engine. But when you go above that FTP, when you go above that threshold, however you want to call it, you start to drain a different energy system. You start to pull from your anaerobic battery, if you will. And that blue line starts to come down. And so when I'm looking at this, we can see that he does some big, right here at this climb right here, he does a big, massive dig. We see this climb right here, he does another big, massive dig. And this was definitely a Cat 4 climb. And so, for John, there's courses for horses. The type of workouts that he does for me prepares him for this type of work that, he loves to do events like the Hoodoo 500, which he and Laura, they did a team time trial for that, and they did really good. They won their age group and event for all that. But it's a great way for me to see and analyze race data. So if John were going to go, come back and try to get a better time for No Country for Old Men, we're going to have this data, and we're really going to understand where he wanted to dig. Now, if he was doing this as a 375 mile time trial, I'm going to, those blue lines are going to tick down because some of the climbs were so excruciating that he had to dig. But we're going to try to keep those blue lines from coming down so that there's no power drops, that he can stay on the bike and that he can be fresher at the end, right? So when you're blowing up those bombs, when you're draining that anaerobic battery, you are draining crucial glycogen scores from the musculature. And that's hard to get back in a race. And so we really want to minimize that as much as possible. So No Country for Old Men, John Crawford, first overall. Great event. Great C event, great B event, however we want to think about it. And I really look forward to Borrego Springs because that's next. For a lot of my athletes, they'll be at Borrego Springs, and I have a few at Psycho. If you're looking for ultra coaching, it is a great relationship that I build with athletes. And the key to the coaching is to really look at your life factors and what you will do while studying your events, while studying the data of other people who do that event. So it's a great relationship. So I am taking clients for 2026. So reach out and would love to talk to you.